Welcome to Earth is Waking Up. I'm your host, Jeremy Anderson, and today we've got a special guest, Sally Griffyn. Sally is AKA the Millionaire Yogi with a great kitty cat that's wanting to be a part of the interview as well. Sally is a spiritual business coach from London, UK, who helps visionaries become world-changing influencers by switching their focus into legacy, from starting a movement, shifting the system, bringing charity into business, and directly giving back. Sally changes the perspective of the business and thereby creates passion and happiness. This current becomes currency. Her latest company, The Visionaries, shoots visionary videos. The Secret of Symbolic Marketing has just launched, in which she trains the founders of business to create their visionary ad focused on who the founder is. They are symbolic, non-product ads that accompany presentations and create thousands of hits on websites. Quote, "Our world is now moving toward more connection, and we need to know who's behind the business, not just what the product is." Conscious business, big. She's a public speaker, events organizer, as well as spiritual business coach. Sally's written 4 books, run a $10 million property development company in London, run over 60 international retreats, and a yoga festival in the UK. Welcome to the show, Sally.
Oh, thank you. Pleasure. I'm Pandora.
Pandora?
Pandora has arrived.
Oh, sweet kitty. Wow. Well, welcome. So can you tell us maybe a little more about maybe your background and how you got into being a change agent in yoga and business?
Well, I've had 2 very strong themes in my life. One was always spiritual, and in the spiritual, I have 2 paths very strongly. One is the Eastern, and that is yoga, and I've been doing it for at least 30 years now. And I was a teacher for a long time. I use it as, well, it's my life practice. And I think it's just an amazing, amazing tool, system, the way it centers you, how it's compassionate. There's so many things that I think are amazing about it. And the other path that I had was very Western, which was following the Wiccan path. Eventually, that was the form it took. But let's say ancient Celtic spirituality, which again has, a series of methodologies that you could use, very spiritual. And when I've wrapped that up, I have trained so much in alternative spiritual systems. I now have a title, which is high-priestess in Wicca. And I'm a yoga teacher. But the other thing that I just had at my fingertips is business. It's almost like I've got this business gene. I never studied. I've just been fascinated by it. I was always able to kind of think of solutions always, with business. And so it was the third strand of the things that I needed to teach and get out there. Yeah. And lo and behold, very spiritual life, very simple life on lots of levels, lots of travel, meeting loads of different cultures. But the thing that comes back again and again, and really I'm interested in legacy projects now, and teaching people how to create massive wealth and abundance in spiritually ethical, background business. Yeah.
Great. That's a huge interest of mine as well.
Yeah.
How to kind of shift the financial powers to the light.
Totally. Totally with you though. Yeah.
So, and I felt very much as well called toward shifting the systems that be, rather than down in the grassroots trying to run around doing all busy, but like let's shift, let's create incentives and shift the dynamic to where conscious business, businesses that are getting back to the original point of business and serving the people, the public, right?
Yeah.
And not just about the bottom line. So I'm curious how if you could explain a little more about how you feel like you woke up to some of these, or if you were just kind of born with uh, the spiritual knowing and yoga and business, like how did you kind of step into all of these?
The spirituality I was born into. I mean, I'm not from a family who are religious. So, and my mother actually went the other way. She became an atheist. She's a doctor, and I think many atheists are as vociferous as they can be, as strong as, you know, evangelical preachers on some level, because they've got something to prove. One's proving that there is a God, one's proving that there isn't. And they've got the same energy, which I don't actually align with. It's a very forceful, energetic. It usually involves control.
Yeah.
And so there I was. I arrived into a family where I've got a mother who's done that. And really, you know, how she turned atheist was because she was a young doctor and she saw a child who was run over by a cement mixer. And of course, the question was, how could any God allow this to happen?
Right.
Right. So it's kind of classic for atheists. There's usually something happens. And but her mother, who I spent many years with growing up, was completely the opposite and completely spiritual. She was in the, oh God, I've now forgotten the name of it. Oh no. Just at that moment, don't worry about it. But she went to a spiritualist church. She was non-conventional, and she believed in reincarnation. She was very open about that. She believed that we have many lives, that there's a journey that we're on. And when I arrived into this family, the two people who just got me immediately, and I was really already just arrived awake, was my father and my mother's mother. So it was like the grandmother. It's such a traditional kind of storytelling thing that girls have these grandmothers. Sometimes boys have these grandmothers too, or these
Yeah.
grandfathers. But it's one generation out that totally align with you and allow you to be who you are.
Yeah.
Because they're not your parents. There's something about not being the parent, so they can support everything. But I mean, I think by age of 9, I have very strong memories of channeled experiences, channeling.
Wow.
By 14, I was reading tarot. By 14 or earlier, I wanted to write a book on ritual. It's such a weird topic for a child. You know what I mean? Such a out there topic. But I was like, I'm going to write a book on ritual, and I have. But it was this deep connection to the land, to ancient practices. I've been called to travel all over the world, and I've spoken to leaders in different kinds of systems, including shamanic systems and tribal systems, and you know, different religious systems. But mostly, I would say it's mystical spirituality versus conventional, orthodox control mechanism spirituality.
Yeah,
You know.
for sure. I grew up in such a convention. You know, I was raised Mormon, and so I've had a lot of things to work through on my own in, you know, in this life, transitioning from that control into more of an internally driven, intuitive, divine guidance system, as opposed to
Right.
following a prescribed set of beliefs.
Yeah.
Um, and which is powerful for anyone that wants to be a leader in this world. And I love that you have gone into business, where what I've learned through various things, but even human design talks about in the different phases of life. So for me, I'm a role model hermit, and first third of my life was learning, experiencing, you know, lots of failures and things, tough lessons.
Yeah.
The next phase of my life is shifting into becoming the teacher, the leader. And
Right.
I feel like, wow, I think midlife is like that for a lot of us, where it's time to be the teacher. And so I love that what you're doing with business is being that leader, bringing this spirituality with it and supporting other spiritual entrepreneurs. Can you maybe talk a little more about maybe how you got into that and what you're doing as far as supporting especially spiritual based entrepreneurs in a way that's empowering and less more empowering?
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think that the natural business that flows through me, out of me, I'm definitely meant to be working in that realm. I mean, it's like at one point I had the query of whether to call myself a spiritual coach or whether to call myself a spiritual business coach. And it's necessary for me to call myself a spiritual business coach. You know, just when I seek within, it's like I need the outcome to have something to do with people's progression in a business way. And I think what I observed was that in many spiritual systems, you see this role model of spirituality as simple, humble, compassionate. I love all of that, but also poor. And, you know, there's many examples of that, including Yeshua, who I call, instead of Jesus, I call him like a master healer, Rabbi Yeshua. Didn't teach, you know, sort of wealth exactly, but the simplicity of life has been reintroduced quite often as poverty. And, you know, and then we've got sadhus in India who they're wandering holy men who they don't have a job basically, but they live on the kindness of strangers and all of that. And there's been a lot of history of poverty equals spirituality. And that means, therefore, that bankers and lawyers and people who really have a lot of power to do with literal how things roll out, and then the spiritual people who are sort of somehow floating along underneath and they're supposed to be okay with it all. Well, right. What happens when you see people like indigenous leaders, like Native American Indian leaders, who are outside the system of the bankers and the lawyers and all of these, you know, quite creepy institutions who have come up with methods of subjugation for the whole of humanity, so that there's 1%, and this is just literal history. You know, I was a history scholar, so I've got a lot of that piece as well. What do we do to change that and to flip it on its head? And right now I feel that we're at this key moment. We could call it the age of Aquarius. That's one angle. You know, devising a new earth, that's another description. But we're entering a new era, which is a very wonderful era, and it's got divine masculine, divine feminine coming together. It's not old order, and old order is kicking off now big time, because it must go. It must go. It can't just work for the 1% and then everybody else is in slavery. And at the bottom, it's poverty, slavery, and malnutrition and all the rest of it. And that we're okay with that. Like some of these governments, like world debt, you know, where it is just seen that it's okay to get countries who are poverty stricken to agree to a massive financial debt that then has interest on it. It's ludicrous, right? It doesn't work, these systems. So I felt very privileged on some level to have streams of knowledge, if you like, to be able to speak on behalf of and use my power, which is, it's not white man, it's white woman power, which is interesting because I work a lot with diverse groups and diverse people. And my teachers are often people who are like, you know, indigenous shamans, and I really honor them. So how can I use my influence in the best way, knowing exactly where I fit in and who I am? And it means that I've come to a place where we have got to flip this now. So if I can teach people to step into a level of confidence is one piece. but it's way more than that. It's an articulation of they deserve, they are worth it. Right now, it's you. I'm working on this piece, which was part of a channeled thing that I got quite recently, which is to work on people's soul gold. Now, when I say that, those two words together, I think you can already feel. If I say I'm working on Jeremy's soul gold and we're doing, you know, a series of pieces of work on that, you can already, without even knowing anything, you can imagine the impact on you as an influencer.
Yeah.
Of the kind of thing. And part of it is money.
Yes.
Part of it is abundance. Part of it is you have to not just step up to opportunity and public levels and all of that, but there's another level which is placing you directly as a piece of the gold pie and of so much worth. And I just feel like a real calling towards that, and I'm good at it. So I'm like, this must be, and I'm working on my legacy now. You know, I'm not as young anymore. I feel totally vital. I'm not saying it in a moany way, but I'm just saying,
Yeah.
I know I have a certain number of years left to cause some seriously good impact, and I want to. So this is why I'm turning my attention to it.
Yeah. So what I find is that there are some of us that want to make change, and there are some of us that want to make change in ways that that really support everybody. So it's a win-win-win for everybody.
Yeah.
And without a spiritual business making enough money to get by, it's pretty hard to find leverage to create much change. And so my understanding is this is how you support spiritual business owners in becoming a bigger change agent. Can you talk a little more about how you go about that?
Yeah, well, I work a lot on creating super niches. So we look at the world and we, you know, it's so obvious that there's just, you know, if I said to somebody who's creating a yoga niche, well, if I said I was a yoga teacher, it would be like, who cares? Really, there's billions of them. And every year there's billions more pumping out all over the place.
Which is great.
So it doesn't, yeah, it's great, but it doesn't have a means for them to really make much money. Yeah. And that they'll often be stuck in a position where they do a lot of comparisons in their area, see what it's worth, and then align themselves with that piece. So when I work with creating a super niche, it's so that you will have no competition. By the nature of it, it's not niche. It goes way beyond that. And the ingredients that we create it with are all the things that make you happy, including the weirdest things that make people happy. But those are the pieces that they'll dismiss because they'll think, oh, I can't put that in there because, you know, happiness has no credibility. In fact, when you start working the other way around and putting the pieces in that make you happy, you end up with super niches. And so I do meditations, guided meditations to get those ingredients out. I'd like to give you a very interesting example because this one, she sort of blew me away. When I first spoke to this woman, and the way I work is I either work totally for free, and that will be all to do with intro or mentoring or that kind of thing, but I do the same piece with everybody. And it's a piece that will alter them and they could take away and they would have some shifts and results, or it's the opener for a deeper conversation. They might come into a program and work with me. So with this lady, I myself thought there is no way this is a client, right? So I was just having this wonderful, I'm doing this meditation to help you with your life so that you come out with something that's going to feed you. Yeah. And she got to this place where I start asking questions when they're in a very deep meditative state. So there's there's such an authentic level of response. So I asked her, so what are your 3 key passions? And the top of it was baby holding. And I said, what? And she said, holding babies. And I know that if you put that piece through a normal business coaching world, it would be dismissed. It would be considered ludicrous, like a little fantasy of some woman's got this, she loves baby holding. But actually, the longer I listened to her, I was like, oh my God, this is really amazing. What we have in the world is often we have education all the way for parents, all the way through, you know, when they're having a baby, all the breath work and all of that stuff. Then you will pay for a doula service during the birth, but right after that, there's nothing. And just at the time that I was talking to her, I'd heard about 2 tragic events where 2 women had both thrown themselves onto the London, you know, tube tracks in postnatal depression. So I had a piece which I just happened to be made aware of, both in very, very early stages of that piece right after birth. And this woman, that's her interest, just that piece. Not when they're toddlers, not the birth, not the, you know, getting ready to have a family piece, just that piece.
Yeah.
And so we started working together. She became a client. I call her the baby holder. She's hilarious.
Wow.
And she is going to franchise that. And what we're creating is a system that will support parents right after birth, when there's often nowhere to go, nowhere to speak. They're kind of looked after, and it's a fantasy all the way up to birth. But then that moment when you just realize how freaking hard it is to have a very young baby, nobody to speak to. She's creating baby holding circles as events and as a service, and she's going to franchise it. And I swear she's going to be really successful with it.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean.
A parenting handbook with that.
And it's going to be like a very successful business because there's nobody in there with her.
Right.
There's some other ingredients as well, you know, but just that one piece I know would be completely dismissed normally. It would be like, who wants to do that? What business can this be? Yeah.
Right. Something tells me she's not the only one that has that need, that because that nurturing desire, I don't think it's hardwired into some of us for no reason.
Yeah.
So that's amazing. So taking something that would normally be dismissed and creating a super niche with it.
Yeah.
And
on some other levels, I mean, that's a very wild and wacky end of it. There's, you know, other people I work with who are much more conventional, but they're really definitely working with this idea of new earth. So one woman who's very successful, who right now I've been coaching, she wanted to see the change in corporate systems. Basically, she'd worked as an advertising pro for most of those corporate systems, like Nestle, like, you know, like I'm talking big companies.
Yeah.
And she's taking in an idea to all these big companies. So most of us, well, from my perspective, have no interest in those big companies. We want to see them go down or alter. She, however, wants to work with them. So it's a really interesting calling that she has. And she's creating 3 areas of shift. So when she goes in, she's already corporate. So she's within them, you know, she gets them.
Yeah.
But we created her as a very, a different kind of prospect. We know that most of the CEOs will be men. And so we target the women below the men who are surrounding those men as the contact. So this is the strategy. The women around those men know that something needs to change. And so the conversations, the reaching out system is for her to link with those people first.
Yeah.
And then she's invited in. And the first thing she gets these guys to do, which is hilarious, she was like, can I really do this? And I'm like, absolutely, you can do it. They have to take their shoes off. And she invites them to shut their eyes. Now, a lot of these guys are so straight. They've been born in a suit that's been buttoned up to here for forever, especially in England, you know. And it's a real direct challenge immediately to shift to something like, oh, we're having a very different meeting here. very different conversation. And what she introduces is change in the form of the physical areas within the company to make them beautiful meeting spaces, full of life, full of plants, full of aquariums. There's a whole thing with aquascaping to create the change, really, like it's a nurturing, life-giving environment. Eco throughout, how to bring in sustainability, how to bring in legacy, and she is like a change agent. And when she started, she had no real self-confidence, I would say. I thought the idea was genius.
Yeah.
And she has just been hired by a very upmarket new chain of hotels in Europe who want to make the restaurants plant-based and see the whole of the interior of these hotels as being this way that she's describing. So they're ergonomic, they're, you know, it's the new earth rolling out. But she got a job within 2 months, seriously, as a consultant, and she's now high up in this world of changing those companies, right?
Yeah.
It's exciting.
That's super exciting, because
Really amazing. Yeah.
the way I see it, this age of Aquarius that we're in is this I think over the ages we've gone back and forth from a masculine driven to a feminine driven and back and forth, and now my understanding is that it's not swinging back the other way, it's coming into balance, so we're working together.
Exactly.
And so I love that what you were just explaining, because that's what I wish I was seeing everywhere, that we had a balance, especially in business.
I know. Well, it's happening. You got to believe it. You know, it's happening. But the piece that hasn't been put in there before is the money. And it's always been like, oh, these are lovely ideas. You know, really, the guys who we're talking about who are now taking that, we don't ask them to take their socks off, but we do ask them to take their shoes off. The first thing she does is a visualization where they're invited to imagine some of their happiest moments. Now, I can probably guarantee 100% that those moments won't be in the office.
Right.
So there will be imagining, I don't know, skiing or something else, you know, or family times or times when they had a real joy. Yeah. And the work comes from that place, like all the working that she does comes from that place. And then they get it. It's like, it's really important to them too. It's not like they're the enemy. Yeah. Right now we've got a system where, you know, we're being polarized to choose. And I am choosing like that this earth is going to shift in a positive way, that it works for all, and the environment and the animals, like the whole package. So it means that business has to be different. The way you set up a business, you know, like nobody can be left out of that. Right. And that's really magical and exciting.
And we can't just sit back and wait for it to happen. The spiritual leaders of us are the ones to step up and create this shift, right?
Yeah. Oh, essential. Look at the world around you, people. We need to, you know, do something. And even if you're sort of more, you're not like a center stage or somebody who wants to be on a stage. I chose to work with influencers rather than leaders. I made a really conscious choice on that, because influencers, the word actually means in flow. So in flow, behind the scenes, people who are not extroverts can have as much system shift, you know, like those computer programmers, people who are doing all of that kind of work, as much as leaders. You know, like Apple was a great example, think different. Yeah. And we did, and it's lasting implications. So there's lots of ways that we can start to, you know, have an influence.
Yeah, so I wonder if you could talk a little about, I feel that there's this myth that a lot of spiritual business owners feel that it's somehow wrong to make a lot of money.
Yeah. Okay, let me work on that one with you so you get it in an instant. This is a great conversation. So last year, during a ceremony that I was in, and I was doing some really deep work, I received an invitation, if you like, and the question that I was asked are you willing to work with the super rich? That's straightforward.
Influencers.
In my world, I have no interest in that. Like, really, super rich is not my turn on. You know, I'm not like, hey, baby, I've got to get in a Ferrari. It's not my motivation or anything. But it was like kind of came out of the blue, and it was during a very deep piece. And so I said yes. And I couldn't see the connection of all the work that I do with that question, but I'd stepped into it, if you like. I'd stepped into a level. And then about 2 months later, I was looking through Facebook and I saw this article in which a billionaire had paid for the right to kill one of the last black rhinos on the planet. And you can feel the heartbreak, right?
Yeah.
Now, normally in those situations, I would be calling that guy all sorts of things, you can imagine. And feeling like, oh, this is just, how can we be doing this at this point? But instead, I suddenly got the other piece, which was like, oh, this is that piece that I'm meant to link here. And I realized that if we can, this is urgent. You know, we've got a critical situation with climate change, despite the denial in certain areas. And we have got a critical endangered species thing going on, and we're losing the Amazon, and look at the Australian bushfires, which broke my heart too. What if we started channeling, funneling, flowing money through billionaires who are spiritually conscious?
Yeah.
And then after that, I heard about another guy who's from Switzerland, I believe, and he is buying up, his aim, he's another billionaire, his aim is to buy up 20% of the Earth's land before he dies. This is his legacy, handing it over to indigenous leaders to be the guardians of it. And he's already, I think, achieving up to 15%, but his aim is 20%.
Wow.
Now that's inspiring. And he's up for protecting animals, land, water, all the things that are for 7 generations, which is like Hopi teaching. So I think about the 7 generations of kids after you. Well, I thought, okay, so I don't have to be the billionaire.
Right.
It's not that I would mind, because I'm not somebody who thinks, what would I do with the money? But it's not a focus. But my focus has become, if I can work with people who have got these incredible ideas, and I can be a puppet master, I can help them, I can work with them to get great systems and make them big enough. That's the soul goal, people. To take it on, to shift, then that is a great calling.
Yeah.
And if you're one of those people who's got a great idea, you have an absolute urgent responsibility to deal with it right now.
Yeah.
So you can't play small. We've got these idiots, like, think about that idiot. What an idiot. And that's putting it mildly, that you think that you can pay for the right to bring an animal to extinction. I mean, what, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And if that's not enough for you to inspire you, well, it should be.
Yeah.
You know?
And they're people like the rest of us, but I think that somehow they've gotten into a position where they're not playing as small as most of us. And so is there anything you could say to help inspire us to play bigger, to step it up, to maybe even start a business if we haven't yet, or if we have one, how to stop sitting in mediocrity and step up?
Well, I think a great question that you can ask yourself, and this is one that I often get people to ponder. Imagine that it's the last day of your life and you've had a good life. So it's not a miserable context. You're looking back on your life, you know you're going, and would you have any regrets if something you hadn't done, if you hadn't done something? That usually points you in the right direction of thinking, like, it immediately causes people to think, oh, I really want to have this experience, or it causes the urgency in them, just as a question, as a hypothetical question. And then we start to look at those areas that you want to have impact in, or something. And even if it was just that you wanted to travel the world, now attach the concept, what if it's not possible to travel the world because there's been so much plastic pollution, there's been so much damage to the environment that, whatever area it is that you feel, I really want to do something in that area, you can start to make the smallest change. And, the piece that I think is really interesting is, it's a very old concept that you can have as much impact in your life, in your home. This is a Buddhist saying, if you see something that disturbs you, if you can make some difference, then do it.
Yeah.
If you can't make some difference, then make peace with it.
Yeah.
But there are so many things that I guarantee you would not be able to make peace with, that you could think, I could just do one little thing, and that's the starting point. It's like, don't sit on your butt. It's just not time to do that.
There's a quote I love from the Dalai Lama, something like, I'll probably butcher it, but something like, if you can't do something, if you can't do anything, I'm totally butchering it. If you can't fix something, why worry about it? If you can, why worry about it? In other words, if you could do something about it, do it. Otherwise, make peace with it.
Yeah. And, there's just such an empowering sense of, I did something to make somebody's life better. I did something to, in my case, stop the plastic pollution. I ran a yoga festival and I said, no plastic.
Uh-huh.
And it was like, well, what do we do with the sponsors who their object or their products are in plastic? I said, they can't be sponsors.
Different sponsors, yeah.
And it was like, oh, okay, well, how do we deliver that? And I was like, we put it in a contract, and it's like non-negotiable. Yeah. So there are certain things that if you start to make non-negotiable in your life, like, I'm not going to allow this damage anymore, like, by my life. And that's the sacred pact piece. And I was going to say to you that one of the things I wanted to give your viewers is a piece that I work with everybody with, and it's called Your Sacred Pact to Self. When you start working at that level with who you are, everybody has got some gift or focus or something that is hugely different than anyone else's, right? And that's your value, really. And if you can write a sacred pact to yourself that, I've come onto the planet for a bigger purpose. I assure you, you're not on the planet to just work 9 to 5 and go home and drink a beer and watch TV. That's not a purpose at all. So there'll be something that will move you in some way. And if you can start to see your life as it has sacredness to it, and you treat it like that. So sacred pact to self is the first conversation that you would have around that. And it causes people, when I do this work with people who've got really established businesses, because I work with branding, it causes them to restructure the brand entirely, because they're like, oh my God, I'm so off. But it's a great starting point for you to start to, so I want to give your viewers that.
Great.
I think it would be really helpful to start that conversation of how can you have impact? Well, how can you not have impact?
By trying to be somebody else. What I'm hearing is that by stepping into who we are and who we're here meant to be in our soul calling, that being more authentic in that we can create that purpose as well as show the others around us the way, and that it's safe to be ourselves authentic and step into our purpose and make a difference.
Absolutely. And if you're not hanging out with the right people to support you in this, then there will be a period of time which you will have to find others like us, like this conversation. You seek it out. and you will have to leave some people behind. It's the way. And it doesn't mean you don't love them, but I can't be around people who are so limited anymore. It's unbearable to even be stuck in that kind of level of conversation. You know, you can see who my favorite guy is on the back there, Prince, because he was so outstanding, and being somebody who was, you know, I'm surrounded by those kind of people in who I look to as examples, you know.
Unapologetically authentic.
Totally. And, you know, always brought black and white together, always worked for, he was a philanthropist. We're now only seeing just the tip of what he gave away to help, you know, inner city black youth, tons and tons and tons of money that he gave away silently. There was no need for recognition. And then also, you know, getting out of the very corrupt record deals that were going on by changing his name to a symbol, so you can't actually use a contract in that way. There's no contractual obligation when something becomes unwritable. So he, you know, everybody said, "What an idiot! What's he doing? Changing his name to this weird symbol." It was to break the record company contract, and it works. He's genius.
Oh,
Totally.
wow.
Yeah. So surround yourself by examples of people who blow your mind. And if you need to step away from some people, know that you're not alone.
Wow. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that piece of the symbol change. And so you use symbols as a marketing tool too, right?
Yes.
Can
Yes.
you mention a little about that? Or?
Sure. I started, my early days, I was a film graduate. That's what I studied in university. Worked in film for some period of time and then completely left it behind, but was always fascinated by it. And so last year, I became fascinated with, we are being inundated with being sold to right now. You can see it all over YouTube. It's driving me nuts on YouTube, how everything is constantly interrupted, and there's all over Facebook and all over everything. You're just seeing these flipping ads crop up. So there I was having one of those moments, and I was thinking, so as entrepreneurs, and because I'm teaching entrepreneurs and, you know, business owners, they need to get their message out. But how are we going to get through this system where right now everybody is repulsed or avoiding being sold to? It's a problem, right?
Yeah.
So I started thinking about it, and there was another nerdy piece as well, which might interest the nerds, because I've got a bit of nerd going on. But it's that generations now are no longer looking at still images. They're not interested as much in a still image as a moving image. So first of all, it means on your homepage, if you've got a photograph, that's not going to keep anyone's attention. Right. So if you have a video, more for sure. But the key is that most of those videos that you see on entrepreneurial coaching, for instance, I coach coaches, is me sitting at a, you know, like this will be on your website, me sitting at a desk. I usually have one prop, the phone, and I have my computer, and I might have a cup of coffee. And this you see time and time again. You should go and count them after I've said this and see how many are like that. And it's like, hi, I'm Judy, and I'm here. I've got this product, and I want to get you into this program as soon as possible. Have you ever thought, you know, da 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 da? And that's what we see. So I thought, if that's the norm, and that is turning people off, then how about we go back to one of the oldest ways of fascination, and it's very good storytelling. And so I took a team who've worked exclusively in music videos, the British music video scene, and I brought them into the business scene. And what they do now is we do a short program where we work with people for 6 weeks to find your symbols. What are your symbols? how would you express these various things that you want to express in symbolic form? And we create what is essentially like a music ad. No direct to camera, so there's no speaking to camera at all. There's limited speaking, but it's all voiceover. And so what happens is they're shot in an epic way. So you're watching not what somebody's product is, but who they really are. And they're called visionary ads, and it's about your vision. So, you know, mine is on my website. You can have a look at it, actually. My website is Millionaire Yogi with an I, .guru, G-U-R-U. And the first thing you'll see is this visionary ad. It's got nothing to do with any products. You just get to see who I really am, like a kind of music video, and it's compelling. And so then what you start to look at the conversion rates as well, the nerdy bit, which is that it's like up to 85%. When if you just have a viewer who is scanning through and would normally not look at anything on my website because of photo, be mildly interested with a video. But if there's a video of this nature, which is like, oh, I can just, you know, go in and see this storytelling thing, because it's ancient storytelling. And you would just have one call to action, which is, in my case, call me. I just, you know, it's what the final words are in the video. So we're starting to roll these things out now and do them as a production. So I formed a new company called the Visionaries. And the whole focus of it is, we don't talk about your product. We talk about you. And why are you here? What are you really here?
Yeah.
What's your, I would say, soul purpose? You know, what's your soul purpose? And even if somebody doesn't want to buy from you, they won't be turned off by you. They will find the difference. It would be like watching something about Richard Branson versus Richard Branson's planes, you know, which would have a limited audience. But watching something about who really is Richard Branson, what's his motivating factors? So yeah, so symbols are really working in an age where we're just getting overridden by being sold to.
Right.
Yeah.
A lot of the corporations use symbols a lot, and we've gotten used to it, but I think that a lot of people don't realize the power of it. And so bringing some of that back sounds like a smart way to leverage whatever it takes to get forward.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Helpful exposure. and the mind, I think, works better with symbols too. Words are, you know, a collection of symbols, but a logo or however else the symbol, I think that we interpret and retain it better, right?
Yeah, we do. Oh yeah, for sure.
Mm. You've got a little nerdiness in there too.
Yeah, I do too. But, you know, I kind of like systems and that, you know, that's why I like how to roll out a business is really intriguing to me. It's just like a puzzle that I don't find it boring at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So great. Well, I want to ask Sally if there's anything else that that you feel would be most inspiring for the listeners, and also beyond that, what would make them really want to work with you?
Ooh, really want to work with me? Well, you would have liked what I've said in this interview. I am non-conventional, so that's what I'm known for. I'm not a conventional business coach. One of the things that I would say is the entire focus that I work on is somebody's happiness. The afterglow is the money. So I'm not about the money, but the money comes, right. And I'm very successful with money. And a lot of people who I work with are coming out of the corporate horror of corporate world, right? And I'm anti-corporate. Like, I really don't buy that system. I think it's bad for your health. Yeah. And so what I would ask you is, I look at ancient systems all the time, and this is, you know, this sort of unconventionality, but we came from an ancient system where there were periods of time when there were calls to action, let's say. And if you want to think about it in the simplest term, if you were planting a seed, would you plant it in midwinter? Question.
No.
Of course not. You'd plant it in the spring, right? There's a natural affinity of a timing, and I work very much with perfect timing. So you can start to have projects working around the, many years or the, cycles where you're planting, but other times you're stepping back. It's the opposite of this push, 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 push.
Right.
Like it would be the same every day. Every day it's the same action. Every day it's the same energy. And so people feel very rested and when the call to action is like, you need an action, then you do it. But when some of the corporate people I work with, the hardest thing for them is to stop.
Yeah.
And it's like, you must stop. You must allow a certain period of growth to take place without ramming this thing forward. And so I think it's a very pleasant experience working with me.
Yeah, so it makes a lot of sense too when you consider the Tao and yin yang and the masculine feminine energies. That push 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 is that over dominant masculine energy, and that's what creates burnout because you never have the recovery. And so I love the more balanced approach.
Yeah, and I think I work on tweaking people's genius, and so they rapidly advance, but with like they're sort of like, oh my God, I can't even believe that just happened, because we're working with really what makes you happy. And I'm really proud of that. I want to be one of those people who, like Bhutan, they say that their measure of a successful country is the level of people's happiness,
Nice. Yeah.
not economic growth. And so I'm that coach. I'm all about happiness, but you do get the money.
Beautiful.
I want you to be some of them, I want them to be the billionaires who will stop the other guys shooting the last black rhino. And I'm up for that. You know what I mean? I'm up for that level. And I'm also up for very low levels, like the baby holder, who I really believe in,
I happen to know somebody that's working to save the black rhinos, so I was hit when you mentioned that. I was like, oh, no wonder she's out there. Okay.
Oh yeah. Well, sending her many blessings.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Sally, for being on the show, for doing what you do, for calling entrepreneurs to step up, the spiritual entrepreneurs especially, to bring the light to the business world.
Yeah.
And make a profit while doing it. Because it needs to be sustainable, and it helps to have that leverage to make change in the world. If you don't have money, it's pretty hard to be somebody that can step up and create change.
Yeah, and then give loads of it away.
Yeah.
Have fun.
Yes.
Yeah.
Fun has to be in there.
It does.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks again, and I want to thank the listeners as well for tuning in. And Sally is available. You can find her. You can click the link below or on her website as well. millionaireyogi.guru. So, all right. Thanks and much love.
Thanks so much.